So I feel, or I think it's important for me to make this now because I like to do things in the moment before they fade away. And that's kind of just my entire life story. But I've had let's call it chance, of seeing two great examples of this within the past week or so, I'd say. And both were tragic. One ended in a positive manner, and the other ended in what was probably the most heartbreaking, tragic manner it could have possibly ended in, and one that made me upset personally. And I will choose to go over that example over the other one. But now I just kind of want to get into it, like what I think my theory and my idea of anxiety is, and how to deal with it, and what it produces, right? Because I feel like a lot of people view it as a negative thing, or it kind of has, like most things in life, a taboo to it. But for me, at least, I view it in a sense of leading me towards a higher form of intellect or thought process, you could say. And the reason I say this is because even when I was younger, when I was about 14 or 15, I would say, I always had this idea or this feeling that kind of came to me originally, and I'm sure that other people had that were a little bit older, but for my age group, it was always viewed as overthinking was a bad thing, right? And I was always really confused about that because I don't view overthinking as a bad thing, and I don't think I ever have. Because what we have inside of us is the most complex instrument in what is the entire universe that we currently know in the human brain, and it's ours, right? And to the notion that overthinking is bad kind of implies to a certain degree that we're doing too much thinking, but I don't think that can necessarily be true because of the limitless possibilities that we can acquire because we're human. And I say that in a sense of, like, of course, obviously you can kill yourself and stress yourself out by thinking too much, but I'd rather go above and beyond than kind of just lower the standards, right? In a sense. And the reason that I think that anxiety plays a part in this is because anxiety is what leads to overthinking. Like, you have to have stressful moments. You have to have moments where you completely just don't know what to do. Like, that is the criteria for any start to anything in life, is that you're not going to know what to do. And that is what produces your anxiety. And that's how you learn and grow. And so for me, anxiety is kind of intelligence in a way because of that. And I think the best way to explain anxiety is that there's one that I knew before, and then I'll explain that and I'll give the example, and then I'll explain what I learned afterward. So the one that I knew before, the best example that I think about it is that anxiety is kind of like entering or traveling through a tunnel. Like, if you ever gone to New York, you have to go through Holland Tunnel, or you have to go through any tunnel. And I think that anxiety is kind of that inducer, or that little injection that lets you go into that tunnel. And I think the process of dealing with anxiety is kind of like being in that tunnel, because of the fact that you're going through a dark place for a little bit of time, right? And what you're achieving is the intellect of the thought process at the end, which is in turn, the light at the end of the tunnel, your destination as to where you're trying to go. But if you get halfway through that tunnel and your car breaks down, or you simply just tell yourself that you're going to stop because you're overthinking in a sense, when in turn you're not thinking enough, it's just not beneficial. And that's the thing that scares me when it comes to just seeing other people view it, is that I see other people practice so much at a certain skill, and then you tell them to demonstrate, you tell them to do something, and they don't, and they tend to run away from it because of their anxiety. And that seriously bums me out, because it's like, I tell people, or the best example I give of it is like, you can be the greatest pepper partner in the world, but it doesn't matter if you don't step on a court, you know? And if you choose to run away from certain things, or you choose to not go in a certain direction because you're scared, or that you don't want that anxiety to kick in and give you a better performance or that higher thought process that you need to go to a certain position or a better job offer or a better place, then you're kind of just shooting yourself in the foot. And I encourage people not to view it as overthinking, but just thinking enough. And I don't want to say not thinking enough because that was what I was saying to begin with. But I want to say not thinking enough because then you're going to stress yourself out, and then it really does turn into overthinking. But just thinking enough. Overthinking is just thinking enough, and you can't view it as overthinking until you get to that blissfulness at the end. That what's the word? What's the best way to put it? That sublime in a sense. That utopia, that original feeling that only you get by getting to the end of that thought process and conquering your anxiety, right? And so that's how I viewed it beforehand. And I don't think it was wrong. I just think that it wasn't thought upon enough. And it's funny because that's my fault because I didn't let my anxiety take me far enough. And so that was how I viewed it before. And I had an incident where someone that mattered to me had anxiety hit them, and then I was able to work it out with that theory, and it was fine, right? Like it turned into a great moment. Bad thing turned into a beautiful moment. It's how life goes, and it was fine. We all went home happy. But I had another person come up to me, or that I tried to help out with, do the same, and I gave him the same advice, thinking that was work, right? But the funny part about life is that even though nothing ever happens just once, it's usually different each time. So I gave that person my opinion and my thoughts on anxiety, and it seemed to really resonate with them. Like it seemed like they actually enjoyed it. And the worst part was that it worked. And I think that was the part that really frustrated me and broke my heart the most is that in the second case, it wasn't like the first, where in the first case, it was a terrible moment, but it turned into a beautiful thing. And then the second case was the worst possible outcome when I thought it had ended well, and that's what really upset me. And I explained anxiety to the person, and it seemed like it went well. And then all of a sudden, it just completely went off the rails. And I think what went wrong with that was that, yeah, the tunnel analysis is right, but just like everything else, there's not just one truth in life. There's not just one way. And maybe it's because I'm younger, but I think that when people tend to achieve something or they reach a certain state in any type of field or any type of accomplishment, they tend to view it as there's only this one route and that's it. But I guess a better analysis for that given situation, even though it was kind of similar to the situation, for the second situation at least, would have been more like boiling water. And I say that because when you boil water, right? If you ever cooked before, when you boil water for pasta or whatever, there's those bubbles that kind of indicate that rise to the top that lets you know, hey, if you touch this water, you're gonna burn yourself, right? And I think that's kind of what anxiety is on a dangerous level, right? Like I feel like that's a better way to describe anxiety and the dangers to it, right? Like it's there, it's boiling, and if you touch it or you try to bend it or poke it a little bit, it's gonna hurt you, right? So to leave it alone in that moment. And I think that what was reached in that moment of the second situation and that person was that they did conquer it and the bubble stopped, right? But then some people's reaction to anxiety is to do too much, right? Like some people don't do it at all, and then other people do it too much, and it really depends on your personality type. And I think in that second situation, the bubbles stopped rising and it was conquered. And then, that was kind of the person's sign. And then I think they tried to do too much because the bubbles went away. And I think they tried to reach their hand into it and they got burnt back. And that really sucks, because if I had known how to deal with that, or if I had known how to explain that a little bit better at the time, and don't get me wrong, I probably suck at explaining things in these videos that I do, or these weekly videos that I do. I probably stutter, talk over myself, But again, it takes overcoming anxiety to sit there and do this. And, I'll learn how to do it myself. But I think that it sucked in the moment, but that's just something that I have to learn to deal with myself, right? Is accepting that sometimes, yeah, you're not going to listen to your anxiety enough. And anxiety is what tells us that you're not doing enough. And in that moment, I probably should have listened to myself and told me and listened to myself, and that I wasn't doing enough. And maybe I could have prevented it. And I think that's really what kills me. But at the same time, it can also be a negative thing, in a sense of there are many accomplished people out there that anxiety just kills them and drives them every day. In the sense of there are probably plenty of accomplished book writers or athletes or whatever that go home and hear that voice in the head of, you're not doing enough, you're not doing enough. I know certainly it's happened to me a million different times, right? And in some terms, even listening to that voice and kind of leading into it, even if it is in a positive manner, is still detrimental to ourselves, because there have been moments where I've done enough, right? And that should have been it. Like I've helped someone, and that's it, right? But then there's that voice in my head that tells me, you're not doing enough, you're not doing enough. Even though you've helped them, you still need to do more. And then I try to do more, and now it just becomes a bother, not to you, but that other person, because you're doing too much, and it just becomes annoying and repugnant. You know what I mean? And so certainly, I think that everyone kind of has that in their head now. Granted, I probably did a terrible job of explaining both um, different analogies and stuff like that. But how to deal with it, I think that the people in your life are honestly how you tend to deal with it the most. And not and if you don't have those people in your life, just being by yourself and understanding that you've done enough, or understanding that not everything is going to be okay at a given moment, as basic as that sounds, is kind of the ultimate counteract to anxiety, because of the fact that if you accept that not everything is going to be perfect in the given moment, then you kind of just calm yourself down. And in that moment, you understand that yes, you could be doing better, but yes, you're doing enough because you've done all that you can in the given moment. And I think that not just talking to yourself, but talking to friends and family helps too. Like for me, there have been moments where I literally just cannot do it by myself. I can't. And a perfect example of that is back when I was going through it the worst, a little over 2 years ago, and I just couldn't hold it in myself. Like my anxiety just got to a point where I just couldn't. And I had a really bad relationship with my mom for maybe 5, 6 years up until that point. Of course, there were good and bad moments, but it was my fault that it was bad. And for some reason, life has a weird way of working itself out, and I just ended up talking, and I just talked and talked and talked for a month, 2, 3 months, and it just got better. And it's really noticeable when it happens too, which is also why I'm kind of upset with myself, because I think in that moment, if I would have noticed that, hey, this person is doing too much, then you kind of still know to go up to them and be like, hey, dial it down a little bit. Your anxiety is getting the best of you. But for other people, I'll never forget the morning where I came out and it was terrible. And I came out, and my mom kind of just looked at me and she was like, are you all right, Dan? And I kind of just looked back and I was like, yeah. And she was like, no, you're not. And I looked back and I was like, no, but I think I'll figure it out. And sometimes people just need that to kind of calm themselves down. And I think that I've always kind of, well, not kind of, I think that I've always done a good job for the most part of dealing with it. And I've never really had it too bad. But just because I've never experienced it to that extent doesn't mean that I'm not there for the people around me, or anybody who needs to reach out and tell me, hey, I'm dealing with a little bit of this right now, and I could use someone to talk to, because I think that talking to someone is really just the most blissful thing that you can possibly do to the human soul. And I think anxiety affects the human soul more than anything else. And I think the most important thing to counteracting anxiety is just being mindful. And I define mindful as being present in the given moment. And I say being mindful and kind of stressing that because if you're talking to someone and when you talk to someone, it's not about how long they pause or how much they stutter or something like that, but you can really tell the intent by which someone's talking to you. And you can tell when someone's being mindful and present in the given moment and when someone's not. And I think that when you talk to someone and you kind of had that chip on your shoulder, that not just anxiety, but any terrible feeling, that energy that you're kind of exchanging kind of just becomes one-sided when you can tell that that person's not being mindful, and that type of conversation really just does not get rid of anxiety. And it takes a special person to kind of sit there and be like, hey, listen, I see you're going through this. I know what it feels like, even if it's not to that degree, and I'm here for you. And that kind of maybe not creates the strongest level of energy back, but at least creates something to give off of and something to reciprocate. You know what I mean? And I personally have never, well, that's a lie. Maybe to a small degree, but I don't want to say for sure. But I've never experienced like a really bad panic attack. And I've seen people who have from when I was the age of 13 to all the way up until now. And I think that, again, me being just mindful in the given moment has been able to kind of calm certain people down in a lot of moments, and maybe sometimes it hasn't, you know what I mean, because sometimes you're just not equipped to deal with it in the moment. But yeah, I think that anxiety kind of in a sense is a good thing depending on how you view it, because of the fact that it can be viewed as something that takes you to that higher form of intelligence. And I don't really think that enough people view it that way, and which sucks because in our society we have a lot of different things that distracts us from that and maybe increases our level of anxiety or our level of negative emotions that we don't really recognize in the moment and then go and take out on someone else, sometimes that other person being ourselves. And yeah, I think that really sucks, but there's always a way to deal with it. And even though my definition of anxiety and how to deal with it is kind of different from others, I think that's kind of really how I view it and how I would choose to deal with it